just something that we hear about from troubled rock stars or people shooting up in back alleys. It's everyday folks in every city, suburb, and small town.
Have a female down unresponsive. I think we got a heroin overdose, yeah.
I just got paged out for a overdose. This is going to be our third or fourth overdose this year, and we're 6 weeks into the year.
Heroin is a very big problem in Hudson. The heroin addicts in this community are not the stereotypical heroin addicts. They are kids 18 to 24 years old.
Melissa could have become anything she wanted. She just had that personality.
They are good students, come from good families. They're involved in athletics.
We lost Tyler a year ago. I would say it's devastating our young people.
Ultimately, that's what's so demoralizing about the problem in this community is because these are good kids.
We mentioned that he's 23 years old, he's clean, but he started using heroin at the age of 16. Phil, how did you hide it from your parents?
I hid it in many different ways, but the biggest one that stick out for me is I just was not home. When I was too high on heroin, I wouldn't come home. And I think when they commented on wearing long sleeves, I remember when it was middle of July, and I would be wearing pants and a long sleeve sweatshirt. And I think the biggest thing I also would do is I would just hide out in my room.
Is that meeting? We're standing outside the Brown County Sheriff's Department here in Bellevue, where today Representative John Nygren of Marinette unveiled 4 pieces of legislation he said are aimed at combating the use of heroin in the state of Wisconsin.
Everybody has a candle. They're on the table over here. If you don't have one, just put your hand up or somebody might get you one. Also a bracelet that says Hudson Healing Together. We are incredibly happy that you're here with us tonight for the first Hudson Healing Together. It's a vigil in memory of those in our community we've lost to heroin and other drugs.
I'm here to tell you that heroin use in America, it's no longer just something that we hear about from troubled rock stars or people shooting up in back alleys. It's everyday folks in every city.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. We're very happy to see you here, and welcome to Heroin in Hudson, a community crisis 1 year later. This forum is sponsored, as the first one was, by the Hudson Community Foundation, which is a community-based nonprofit committed to having a positive impact on the Hudson area and to enhance the quality of life here. I'm Meg Heaton. I am a foundation member and a reporter for the Hudson Star-Observer. It was just a year ago, almost to the day, that this place was filled to overflowing with people concerned and wanting to know more about a crisis in Hudson that had killed close to a dozen in our community, many of them young Hudson High School graduates, and that had devastated the lives of countless others and their families. That night we heard from 2 young men, Hudson High School graduates, who described the nightmare of heroin addiction and the difficult ongoing road that is recovery. We heard from their parents who shared in this nightmare and struggled right alongside their children. We heard from treatment professionals who talked about the insidious path of prescription painkillers to heroin and the difficulty of treating this addiction. We heard from law enforcement who do what they can to hold those responsible for selling the drugs to account, but who clearly say we can't arrest our way out of this issue. And we heard from a mother who is grieving the loss of her 21-year-old daughter who died a year ago in May. Since that night, unfortunately, we have lost several others to heroin and other drugs, including at least 3 more of our young people. And Hudson's story has been told across the river and across the country, as you can see, in the New York Times and by Oprah Winfrey. We know now we are not alone in this struggle to salvage and save lives. That night is one that I will never forget. But while I was overwhelmed by the turnout and the positive response from the participants in the audience, I was almost immediately aware that the real measure of the success of that evening would be in what happened next. What would we do as a community about what we had just heard? And that's what tonight is about. The speakers on tonight's program represent stakeholders in the community who have stepped up to the challenge that night presented to all of us. They will share what they have done or are planning to do to take on this crisis in our community. Tonight, we can take pride in what's been accomplished over the past year, but we also need to recommit ourselves to the work that still needs to be done. We have made a start, but only a start. There will be an informal question and answer period following all of the speakers. It will take place in the fellowship hall, which is just to your right as you exit here. For our first speaker, one of the first people I heard from following the forum was Superintendent Mary Bowen-Egebrotten. She said that the Hudson District wanted to be part of the community-wide effort to address drugs in Hudson and was encouraged by what she heard that night. Anthony Mayer is the District Director of Student Services, and he will outline what the district has done over the past year. Please welcome Tony Mayer.
Good evening, and as Meg said, I am Tony Mayer. I'm the Student Services Director with the Hudson School District, and I am very proud to work and live in a community that's willing to come together and take on really challenging issues. I'd like to thank the Hudson Community Foundation for their continued leadership related to heroin prevention. The Foundation's efforts have been impactful in raising awareness in our community and bringing people together to create solutions rather than just admiring a problem. Heroin and drug use in our community is a community issue, and community issues, like Meg said, require community response. In responding to community issues, each stakeholder or organization views heroin and drug use through their own lens of expertise. And as a school district, our lens of expertise is education. Whether we're talking about academics or behavioral issues, the educational lens, I have a PowerPoint. The educational lens includes instruction, prevention, and intervention. So we use a tiered approach in delivering these services. And the best illustration of that tiered approach is the pyramid that you see here. You'll notice that the green base is the largest section. This is our tier 1. It's the core of what we do. It's a lot about instruction and proactive preventative measures. We know that our tier 1 programs are effective when they're yielding a desired outcome, the outcome that we're seeking for approximately 80% of our students. The next section up the pyramid represents tier 2, it's shown in yellow there. This is for a specific group of students, a smaller group of students that are at risk for developing substance abuse issues. We wouldn't expect that any more than 15% of our students would need tier 2 intervention. And the final section at the top of the pyramid, the red section, is our tier 3. These are intensive interventions. They're highly individualized for students that are actively dealing with very significant chemical health issues. We wouldn't want or expect that any more than about 5% of our student population would require tier 3 interventions. So as I move through this presentation, you're going to notice that similar to this pyramid, where tier 1 represents the bulk of our students, you're going to see that tier 1 also represents the bulk of our work in the schools. Our work is designed to provide instruction, preventative, proactive measures for all students to learn the skills and the tools and have the supports they need to live a healthy lifestyle and say no to drugs. So thinking about our tier 1 activities, again, proactive, prevention, instruction, you'll notice that not all of these activities are specifically related to drug use or drug prevention or drug education. Drug prevention is more than just education about specific drugs and chemical awareness. We need to be providing students with the tools they need to be able to live a healthy lifestyle, to know how to make good decisions, to know how to report concerning behaviors, and how to refuse concerning behaviors. We look to implement systems that create a positive, respectful school climate where students are respected and feel valued, where they feel they belong and have positive connections with adults. We look to create opportunities where students can participate in activities and clubs that are in line with their own interests and their passions. And when we do all of these things together, we believe that we're promoting the health and wellness in all of our students, and that translates into the prevention of chemical use. But you'll also notice up here some things that are very specific to drug prevention, like our Counteract curriculum that's being delivered by the North Hudson Police Department at North Hudson Elementary School. We also have drug awareness instruction that's embedded into our health curriculum. We have drug detection dogs that are present in our secondary buildings, and we're very fortunate to have one full-time dedicated individual whose sole responsibility is to focus on alcohol and drug abuse prevention strategies for our district, and Kelly Hoyos is here with us tonight. And the items that you see that have an asterisk are examples of the work that we've done this year to support student wellness. And I'd like to highlight a couple real quickly. And the first one is down in the bottom right-hand corner, and that's the Know the Truth student and parent community presentations. We have a representative from Know the Truth that will talk a little bit about the work they did and share some of the student survey data that they were able to collect in just a few minutes. Then the other thing I'd like to highlight is our Student Concerns Reporting Form. This form was designed to provide students, parents, and community members with just another avenue for reporting concerning behaviors to the school. The form is live on our middle school and our high school websites at all times. You're able to access it from your mobile device or from your computer. You can fill it out online and submit it electronically, and it confidentially is sent to one of our school administrators immediately. They're then able to investigate the issue and take appropriate action. We really want to emphasize the importance of reporting concerning behaviors. This is something that we really try to teach our students, and we want to reiterate it here tonight as well, that we all have a role in reporting concerning behaviors, and we definitely want to know about those things so we can act. In terms of our Tier 2, and this is our targeted interventions for students that might be at risk for developing substance abuse issues, we have a variety of interventions and strategies that we use. We're very fortunate at the high school level to have a school within a school model to support students that are at risk for some of these issues. We also offer sober groups where students who are actively involved in the recovery process can come together and get support and get facilitation from our prevention specialist. We offer concerned students groups where students who may be living with a family member who is struggling with substance abuse issues, those folks can come together and get peer support and again facilitation from our prevention specialist. We also have a very robust peer helper program at our high school level. So volunteer high school students are trained in problem solving specific teen issues with their classmates, and they're also trained to know when a specific issue might be beyond their capacity to help, and they are trained in how to turn those issues over to an adult. Our Tier 3 interventions are highly individualized and intensive in nature. Again, this is a lot of the work of our prevention specialist who is working one-on-one with students, providing individual meetings to either help them raise awareness of their substance abuse, kind of going through that contemplative phase of coming to terms with maybe they do have a problem. Other students are at a point where they're seeking out treatment resources, and our prevention specialist is able to help them as well as their families connect with those resources. And then it might seem strange on the bottom, I have disciplinary processes and practices listed there. And I'll give you one example that really illustrates this. Students that are caught either possessing, distributing, or using drugs in our schools most commonly come through what we call a pre-expulsion conference. And this is a voluntary meeting with the student, the parents, and school district officials, school counselor. And we talk about what led to the behavior. And a very common outcome from these meetings is an agreement from the student and the family that they will seek a comprehensive chemical health assessment and then follow any and all the treatment recommendations that might be provided. So this is a really powerful vehicle for impacting students and enabling families to move forward with getting some help for their children. In the middle there, you'll see an asterisk. Again, this is work that we've been doing this year we've had a steering committee that has been investigating how we can create mental health services and provide them in our schools on a regular basis. Next year, we are looking forward to having this pilot project started in 3 of our buildings, at EP Rock Elementary, at our middle school, and at our high school. And the idea here is that we're trying to break down barriers that students and families commonly experience when seeking out mental health therapy. And the idea here is that there's a great deal of overlap between mental health issues and chemical health issues. They happen simultaneously in a lot of cases, so we believe that by providing students access to mental health therapy right in school, that we will be able to address chemical health issues as well. So you've heard about the tiers of instructional services, prevention, proactive services, and supports for students. We also want to evaluate how effective these things are in meeting the needs of our students. One of the first things we look at is how is our prevention specialist time being used? And we talk about those intensive interventions in meeting with students on an individual basis when they're struggling with chemical issues. You can see that Kelly is very involved, particularly at the high school level. This is only one segment of her work. She also does many proactive things in the Tier 1 and Tier 2 levels. But at that Tier 3 level, you can see 133 different individual student meetings this past year. It's fantastic. Some other kinds of data that we look at come from survey data. And the next 4 slides that I'm going to show you are data from the Youth Risk Behaviors Survey. This is an anonymous survey that goes out to students in grades 6, 8, 10, and 12 every 2 years. And the questions are related to various risky behaviors. So things that are included in the survey relate to traffic safety, suicidality, sexual behavior, alcohol use, and then drug use. So I tried to pull the slides that are most germane to our topic of heroin tonight. There was one very specific question only on the high school survey that asks, have you ever tried heroin in any of its forms? And out of approximately 200 high school students that responded, 0.6% responded that they had tried heroin in one of its forms. This is very consistent with information that's being shared with our prevention specialists as well as our school counselors, that our high school students aren't really actively using heroin. They're using other things prior to using heroin, but it's not prevalent in our schools. This is also confirmed through what we're finding. When we are finding drugs in the schools, it isn't heroin. We haven't seen heroin yet, but we recognize that there are other chemicals that are precursors or gateways to heroin use, particularly around prescription drugs. And so this first slide comes from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and it's for our middle school students. So again, grades 6 and 8 that responded, and you can see that the use of prescription drugs without a doctor's order actually did tick up from 2012. So from 2.1% to 3.7% most recently. I found this alarming, especially in light of some other information that I will share with you in just a second. So I dug into this a little bit more deeply, and what I saw was that our 8th grade student count between 2012 and 2014 was actually identical in terms of the percentage that was saying yes, they had used prescription drugs without a doctor's order. What had changed was the percentage of 6th graders saying yes to this question. Back in 2012, 0% of our 6th graders responded yes. This last year, it was close to 4%. So this is very concerning and something that we definitely need to be looking at and focusing on as we move forward. Some of this other information is far more positive than that. Again, middle school students that have been given, offered, or purchased illegal drugs on school property has been cut by more than half from 2012 to 2014. Most recently here in 2014, about 1.6% were saying that, yes, they had done that. That's a good statistic. It's certainly an area of concern. We would hope and be striving for our schools to be 100% drug-free and all of our students to be 100% drug-free, but it's good to know that that's going down. And then those same two questions as they apply to our high school population. And the YRBS data actually provides us with some comparative percentages as well at the high school level. You can see state and national averages for these two questions. And more good news, in terms of the use of prescription drugs without a doctor's order at the high school, we've seen a significant decrease from 26.1% to 12.6% from 2012 to 2014, and we're significantly below both state and national averages. And then students that have been given or offered or purchased illegal drugs on school property, again, a very significant decrease from 2012 to 2014, 13%, about 9%. And then even more impressive are the fact that we're well below both state and national averages. Some other data that we like to consider when we're determining the effectiveness of our tiers of support are perceptual data from our students related to our building climate. We pay particular attention to the statistics about how students feel in terms of their relationships with adults, how safe they feel at school, how involved and active they are in clubs and other activities. And you can see here from our high school survey data that our students are feeling quite involved, quite supported. And thinking back to our tiers, I said that when we're hitting about 80% of a desired outcome, we know that we're pretty effective at the tier 1 level. So we're seeing that here. Finally, I mentioned to you that we have a pre-expulsion process, and that yields some important data as well. So students that are going to pre-expulsion conferences for alcohol or drug-related issues has been falling over the last 4 years. And this past year, we hit a 20-year low with only 9 pre-expulsion conferences that were related to alcohol or drug issues. So many of those things are really good data, and they support the instructional services, the prevention services, and our proactive approach in our schools. Yet we recognize that there are definitely still students that are struggling in our schools with substance abuse, struggling in your homes with chemical issues, struggling in our communities. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to continue to do as a community. And as we move forward as a school district, our first and foremost goal would be to continue to work cooperatively with all stakeholders. We believe that this is a community issue and it requires a coordinated, collaborative community response. We're very excited to be implementing our co-located mental health program in 3 pilot schools next year. We're also looking to bring back recent graduates to participate in a focus group and kind of give us a student's view of the realities of drug use both in our schools and in our communities. And we want to use that information as opportunities for growth and growing new initiatives in our school and hopefully in our community. And finally, you may have read that the school district and the city of Hudson are engaged in conversations about the possibility of adding a second school resource officer. I'm very hopeful that that will come to fruition, and if it does, we'd be looking to expand our Counteract curriculum into the other City of Hudson elementary schools. And then finally, moving forward, we also want you to know that we're very open to your ideas and suggestions, and we want to hear the questions or concerns that you may have. So I'd like you to feel free to contact either myself or our prevention specialist, Kelly Hoyos. We'll both be here after the presentation tonight to talk with you or answer any questions that you have or listen to suggestions that you may have for the schools. So again, thank you to the Community Foundation. I'd like to welcome Will from Know the Truth. I mentioned that they were great partners with us this past year, providing some great dialogue with our high school and middle school students and offering a parent seminar, and he's here to share some of that information. So welcome, Will.
Thank you again for coming out. My name is Will Connell. I'm with a program called Know the Truth. We're a substance abuse prevention program. We're based out of Minneapolis, but we actually speak in different parts of Wisconsin as well. We started in 2006, and we started with a lot of assemblies, and over the years we've really gotten into the classroom presentations, one-on-one, talking to the kids. And through our program, we use a peer-to-peer format. And so the people that speak with Know the Truth have actually experienced drug addiction. We hear a lot of programs in the past saying, just say no, don't do drugs. We agree with those messages 100%, to just say no, to not do drugs. But when it came down to our decisions, everyone that speaks with Know the Truth can say they've said yes, and they can say, this is what happened to me. These are my consequences, this is where I'm at now. And we are a program of Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge. We're the prevention department. And so that's been around for many, many years. I won't even give you a date on that, but Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge has over 500 residents on any given day, inpatient, outpatient, in 8 different facilities in Minnesota. So I am going to show some statistics on what we found in the schools. After a year ago, after the forum, we were part of the initiative to do more, to a call to action. And so we came in and we did, I believe 25, I already talked about that. I mean, 25 different presentations. And if I can get my slides to catch up with me here. There it is, 25 different presentations, 1,050 students. And what we do is we focus a lot on question and answer. You can see that we received over 600 text message questions in, which led to personal conversations with that student, talking to them about things they've never talked about before, maybe some underlying issues that led to their addiction. And so that's one of the things we highlight. And I actually want to direct you to a survey in your folder. It's a blue survey. It's on the right hand side of the folder. And that's going to be something you can hand to one of our ushers on the way out. If you could just give us some feedback on the event this evening, that would be great. It's a blue document. But on those surveys we give to the students, we have a bunch of different questions, but mainly we gather information on the drugs they've tried and what they plan to do in the future. So I don't know if I'm pointing this at the wrong. There we go. So we got Hudson High School is right at about 30% have used illegal drugs as compared to Stillwater, just across the water there. Significantly lower, as Anthony mentioned. Hudson Junior High, about 6% have used illegal drugs. And so this can be confusing. It looks like at first glance that 100% of Hudson High School students have used marijuana. That is not the case. It's of students that use, 100% of them have used marijuana. That's honestly not a big surprise. Marijuana is one of the things that's brought up most in conversation with the students, talking about gateway drugs and how things can progress and where it all starts. Marijuana is usually on the forefront of that discussion. Prescription pills is a little bit higher than what we see in most schools as far as of users. And so there's 39% there. And then Stillwater, 34%, Hudson Junior High, 47% for the prescription pills. And that is a little bit concerning just because 3 of 4 heroin addicts started with a prescription narcotic. And so having myself, as I said, peer-to-peer format, having gone through a heroin addiction, I'm from Hastings, and a lot of my friends started with prescription painkillers, and so getting those out of the medicine cabinets into the take-back facilities is huge. And so I'll move right along here. All right, and there's another comparison with Somerset. We do speak in Somerset schools, and also Stillwater's up there as well. And so you can see some of them are lower, some of them are higher, but the prescription pills, as you can see, Hudson, of users, this is of users again, is a little bit higher than what we see just across the water and a little bit east. And so the prescription pills are about 28% in Minnesota. We're based out of Minnesota, and so I have a lot of fresh Minnesota statistics, but 28% of users say prescription pills, and so that's a good comparison there. And so the next two here, we asked the students, what are the reasons for not using? And the number one answer is legal consequences. They don't want to run into these guys with the badges in the back, right? Understandable. The second reason is 77% say parents' disapproval. And this is a survey ranging from 6th grade up to seniors. They don't want to disappoint their parents. And so you do have a huge impact in the student's life. And then also another interesting statistic there, after seeing our presentation, 87% of students surveyed made a commitment to not use illegal drugs in the future. And those are a few other of the different top 3 influences that our presentation had on the students. And we conduct these surveys after each presentation directly after, and so they're very honest, we've found. They're anonymous surveys, and so a lot of good information there. And I just want to read a survey comment actually from one of the Hudson students. And they have a comment section on the back of the survey. It's not anything that they're forced to write down. They have the option of writing a survey comment. It says, "My parents are divorced. I bounce between their houses. They talk often about their hate. I feel depressed after my friends leave. I don't feel like working towards anything. I was offered drugs. I said no. I now have all A's and B's. My parents have moved on. The next generation is learning from their mistakes." And so that's a comment that's really stuck with me personally because I was leading that presentation. And that is a positive comment, right? I mean, he went through some tough things, he said no, and he bounced back. And so I think continuing, as Anthony said, to inform these students and catch them at a young age is going to have a huge impact moving forward. The next steps, I would say, educate them. Every dollar spent on prevention saves $18 in future costs. And so that's a huge asset to this fight on heroin addiction. And there's also just a few other things here. The checklist mentality, a lot of parents kind of get in the checklist mentality when talking about drugs or like the sex talk, the drug talk, the curfew talk, I don't know what else, but a lot of this is checklists. Have the talk once and then move on. We really encourage parents to have those conversations continuously and repeatedly and have an open channel there. And so yeah. Just wanted to remind you briefly about that survey. Grab that from me at the end when you leave. We do have some more information in there about prescription pill take-backs and some different things for navigating teen years and talking with your child or your loved one. And yeah, thank you so much for having us out. Thank you for coming. It shows your support, and I appreciate your time. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tricia, I believe. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tricia Christensen, past president of the Hudson Community Foundation. I'm going to speak briefly about what we've done since the forum last year. And as Meg mentioned, last year, almost to the day, we had the forum with the community, and shortly after, we created the fund within the Hudson Community Foundation specifically geared towards heroin prevention and awareness. With that fund open, some of the parents that were part of the forum and the board members were able to raise some dollars through events and donations. While we were raising some funds, the other thing we were doing was creating an open dialogue, specifically with Anthony, with the Hudson School District, and talking about what were some of the things that were happening in other organizations. And what we identified was there was a great plan to speak to the students, and what we could do as a foundation is fill the gap and try to reach the parents. So we created a piece that was mailed to parents in the area. And as you can see, it's not a warm fuzzy. It wasn't meant to be. It's kind of jarring. And what we're hoping to do is really create that tool as, is that working? Will was mentioning that it's hard to speak to your children about drugs or sex or whatever it may be. But when this comes into the mail, and we identified 3,800 homes in the zip code that had students within the middle school or the high school, when this came in the mail, we were hoping that this would be an opportunity to review the information and use it as a tool to share with their kids. It had a lot of the basic stuffs about, prescription drugs. Maybe they didn't realize that they had a tool right in their medicine cabinet that was going to be a situation that it might not be your kid, it might be a kid's friend. We were very good about not saying anything about we're talking to you because your child has a problem, but just really keeping the awareness high that this is a problem in the entire community and we all have to work together. it opened with a letter from the Hudson families that were impacted. And it was a very strongly worded letter that, again, this is something that could happen to any family. These are good families, and people have to be made aware of the issues that can lead towards heroin addiction. It provided facts on how cheap and easy it was to get addicted, again, pointing back to prescription drugs and how important it is to turn it in, listing some of the resources we have locally and how to turn those in. Provided warning signs and resources. You know, if you had questions, you know, we had Callie's email in there pointing to the school. We had local law enforcement. We had Hudson physicians. We had a lot of local area resources if people had questions. Because some of these people, this is the first time they were hearing about it. They didn't come to the forum, and suddenly they're on Facebook seeing people repost the New York Times saying Hudson is a heroin hotbed. And so this was meant to be more information and pointing them to the right direction. And at the back of the booklet, just as Will had with Know the Truth, there was a pledge, and it was a two-way pledge, and it was something that they could share with their child saying, I pledge to be open and honest, and it doesn't have to be about their own issues, it could be a friend's issue, and it was the parent pledging to help and to listen, because lives are more important than judgment. Beyond the mailer, I don't want to over-click. Beyond the mailer, we continued with our efforts in the new year with the vigil. And the vigil was meant to do several things. It was to allow the community to come together and support and awareness and hope. It was meant to be a positive event. But we really do want to keep the issue top of mind. Again, our fund was for prevention and awareness, so we were trying to think of ways to get our community together in the open, discussing heroin in a positive way, and not hiding from it or being ashamed of it. This is something we have to work out in the open. And as a community, I think we did a good job showing that Hudson stands together with their families, and that we'll do our best to keep preventing any future deaths. In addition to this vigil, one of the things we put into place that will be an ongoing tool for awareness is the memory quilt. At the vigil, we handed out several squares that people could personalize in memory of somebody they lost or somebody who was suffering. And within the next few months, we're going to be retrieving those squares and then creating a quilt that can be shared with the community. Next up, we have Dr. Kevin Hellman from Hudson Physicians, who is one of the resources we listed in our piece. So thank you, Dr. Hellman.
Everybody, thanks for having us today. My name is Kevin Hellman. I've been with Hudson Physicians for 26 years. There's 40 providers in our group now, so our clinic is up at the hospital. The concerns that we're talking about, a lot of discussion about prescription drugs, and there's a lot of legitimate uses for prescription drugs for people with surgical pain, cancer, end-of-life issues and such, and certain people with chronic pain issues. The problems is that all of the drugs aren't used appropriately in many circumstances, and the last year that we have real solid data said that 15,000 deaths occurred in 2008 from opiate overdoses, most of which were unintentional. The numbers now are getting up to the point where the amount of prescription drug deaths are equal to the amount of people that are killed on our nation's freeways. Between 1999 and 2008, the deaths from opiates have gone up 4 times. Interestingly, the sales from the pharmaceutical companies have gone up 4 times also because of aggressive pharmaceutical marketing and teaching like blood pressure and pulse and heart rate are vital signs, but there's a fifth vital sign that's called pain. But pain treatment isn't the same in all countries. We prescribe twice as many narcotics per individual as they do in Canada, for instance. The misuse of narcotics fall into a couple categories. Diversion being one of them, where people are either selling or stealing or giving away their prescriptions. And the other issue that goes along with it that causes problems is people combining their prescription drugs with other drugs that are both legal and illegal. On our end, we have quite a few tools that we can use, and luckily we're getting more tools all the time. But we'll always be able to observe and evaluate people when they come in. Self-reporting is something that people generally don't do, especially if there's a problem. We can get prior records from a patient from other clinics or discuss patients with other physicians that have treated those people in the past. And drug testing is becoming more and more used. And drug health testing can help us in a couple ways. First of all, looking for the particular drug that the person is being prescribed and see if they're taking it or not. Oftentimes we do a drug screen for prescription drug that the patient is using, and it comes up negative, meaning they're not using it. Guess where it's going. Or else we do a drug screen and then other drugs show up, either legal or illegal also. So drug screening is very, very helpful, and nationwide the testing shows that about 63% misuse their drugs in some way, not taking them according to how they're supposed to be taken. About 60% of the time there's additional drugs that are found in the drug screen that are not supposed to be there. 40% of the time there's no drugs that are found in the drug screen. And this is what we're using to make decisions whether people are going to be able to continue to get their medications, particularly for chronic pain. People ask what kind of people use or misuse prescription drugs, and everyone does. There's no boundaries for age, sex, income, insurance. It's the same across the board. Luckily, we have some other newer tools that I think are being very helpful, because there's the people that are going to use or are going to misuse are going to do everything they can do to get what they're looking for. And a few years ago, the Minnesota prescription monitoring program came along where we as physicians can look up a particular patient if we suspect that they're misusing drugs and find out if they're getting medications from other physicians and other facilities. And 2 or 3 years ago, the Wisconsin prescription monitoring program came up, and that's been very helpful, and Minnesota has expanded their program to, I think, 18 or 20 other states. So I think eventually this will be a nationwide program where you'll be able to find out as a physician if people are getting their medications from people other than yourself. We have a narcotics agreement and now a stimulant agreement that everyone that's on chronic pain medications has to sign or abide by. That includes random drug screening and agreements to things that we feel is a safe way to prescribe the medication safely. And we've gone through 3 phases of that, and in limiting the amount of narcotics patients can get from our clinic. And we're on our 3rd phase now, which I'm pretty happy about. Clean out those medicine cabinets. Don't forget patients that are on hospice or other chronic treatment that once a person passes on, there's oftentimes a ton of medications that should be disposed of. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer after the program. Thanks.
We're fortunate tonight to have with us Representative Dean Knudsen, who's going to talk about some things that have happened statewide.
It's good to be here, and thanks to the Hudson Community Foundation for everything you've done to raise awareness of this issue that isn't a Hudson crisis. It's a statewide and a national problem. What's different about Hudson is really the forthright way that as a community it was addressed and done in the open, which is really what it takes. At the level of what can you do about changing laws, I've got a kind of a brief summary of what we've done in the last couple of years. First, in the area of prosecution, the district attorneys across the state of Wisconsin have for years asked to have pay progression for their assistant district attorneys. These are the prosecutors that are on the front lines. And so essentially pay progression is as you get more senior, you get paid more. And by doing this, and we did do it now, and I'm committed to funding that going forward, we'll be able to retain experienced, effective prosecutors. The second thing we did was that while that pay progression was the number one ask of the district attorneys, the governor had said to them, you can't have both. You can't have more district attorneys, ADAs, and better pay for all the ADAs at the same time. So the governor's budget came out without any additional prosecutors statewide. What I did, and I have with me Tim Lundquist is from my staff down in Madison. He really figured out how we would do this, but I introduced an amendment in the budget, into the state budget, that found the money for us to get an additional state-funded full-time prosecutor for St. Clair County. And when we did it, there were only... So that took the full-time prosecutors in St. Clair County from 4 to 5 full-time prosecutors, and that went into effect about a year ago now, or just about a year ago now. And then, there's at least one or more county supervisors here, and you're probably aware that this spring the county supervisors took action to add yet another assistant district attorney for St. Clair County that's county funded. And so St. Clair County, in the space of this year, basically since your last forum, has increased the number of full-time assistant district attorneys significantly, the largest increase anywhere in the state. So those are three things related to prosecution. But really, I think everyone here should know, and you probably all do know, that there's no way that you can arrest, prosecute, and incarcerate your way out of a problem that's really rooted in addiction. If we were to lock up every drug dealer in St. Clair County, or even in the state of Wisconsin, we all know here, perched on the edge of the Minnesota border, that heroin addicts will very easily find a way to still get heroin and bring it back here or use it over there, so that really doesn't solve the problem. There was a package in the film, Representative Nygren was mentioned, and he's a colleague of mine, the chair of the Joint Finance Committee. His daughter is a heroin addict who he was called to a home. She had overdosed. The friends had all left. She was blue and very near death, and so he knows this issue on a very personal level, and he introduced what he called the HOPE package, Heroin Opiate Prevention Education. And originally there were 4 bills in there. What we ultimately signed into law were 7 bills, and I listed them out on this handout. These bills are a step. It was designed to give local communities tools that they could use to try to address the problem. No one has ever said that these group of bills or any group of new laws that you could pass would solve this problem, but we can make progress. And I think Representative Nygren did a good job. With his leadership and by being able to tell the story, we passed these all in a very bipartisan manner. I might be wrong, but I think most of them were unanimous votes. And that's somewhat unique. I'll go through them quickly. One was we required a photo ID to pick up a prescription for a Schedule 2 or 3 controlled substance. So if you're getting Vicodin or if you're getting OxyContin, then you have to show ID now. Narcan is a reversal agent. It's an emergency drug that's used when an overdose has happened, and it has the effect of reversing the heroin, and is a life-saving drug when given in time. And yet in a lot of communities, first responders, EMTs, and so on didn't have that, or there were laws. So we changed the law to allow all emergency personnel to have Narcan. And we encouraged the calling of 911 by granting limited immunity from prosecution for someone who's there at the scene, sees what's happening, and too often they are nervous about calling for help because they're afraid that they're going to get ensnarled in the whole prosecution themselves. And so they do one of a few things. They scatter and leave without calling for help, which of course isn't good, or they call for help and then leave, so they're no longer there to render assistance. And so, and this one became very controversial when Minnesota tried to do it. In Wisconsin, I was proud of our legislature when we did this and did it. It wasn't without a lot of discussion, but we passed it, and I think it's a good thing. The other way is the drug disposal programs that I first heard about many years ago now from Dolly when I was serving as mayor here in Hudson, and she kind of led the way with our local drug disposal program. And we found that there were some barriers and red tape that we were able to remove so that it's easier for communities to have an effective drug disposal program. This is really a key gateway. I think most people here now know that, you just heard about it. But so the question is, once you follow Dr. Hellman's advice, you're going to clean out grandma's medicine cabinet, and the question is, what are you going to do with those? And that we need to have more options, better options. We've got a good program here in St. Croix County. We expanded treatment and alternatives, treatment rather than incarceration. The TAD program in Wisconsin, back when we were doing the budget, we heard numbers about how the payback for every dollar that would go in is probably tenfold at least. And so we did a significant increase during the budget, but then we did another significant increase later during this, within this whole package. And then for underserved areas, which essentially means there are areas within the state of Wisconsin where there are very few treatment alternatives. And so we established a pilot program and funded it for treatment pilot programs in underserved areas and funded that. I think that'll be helpful. And then finally, we adopted what other states have been doing, what's called swift and certain. So this is, and again, Representative Nygren's daughter is a pretty good example, and he understood this very well. That unfortunately, you know, she survived her overdose. She was also prosecuted and served a few years in jail, and is still involved in the correction system. And what swift and certain does is that if you have a violation of your probation, essentially, it used to be there'd be a long process of bringing you before a judge, and then too often what the consequence was you go back in jail, which really isn't very helpful because jail doesn't stop the problem either. That's already been shown for those folks. Here what happens is there's a very quick consequence that other states have found is actually more effective than waiting for a hearing and then having the potential of going back. And so that's what we've done. So that's 10 things we did in the last 2 years or 18 months. I think where we're going next, I would point to the prescription drug monitoring program that Dr. Hellman mentioned, which is this database to try to prevent someone from going from doctor to clinic to hospital across Wisconsin and come from Minnesota and come over here and get prescriptions. They know exactly what symptoms to describe and the way to convince the well-meaning physician that they need to write a new prescription. And we were late to that party in Wisconsin. With 46 states had a prescription drug monitoring program before ours went into place. Ours is still optional. Ours has a potential, it's done all on paper instead of electronically, or the electronic is an option as well, so it can be done in paper, which increases the lag time. I think there are many ways that we could strengthen and improve the effectiveness of that prescription drug monitoring program. We're going to be looking at that. And I think there's a broad consensus in the legislature towards putting more funding to treatment options. The TAD and treatment, I think, will be going in that direction. So I'll be happy to stay afterwards and answer questions. Thank you.
encouraged by the fact that at least in Wisconsin, our politicians are getting something done, so that's good news. And to that end, one of the things that's gotten done is with our district attorneys and our prosecutors. And Prosecutor Amber Hahn is with us tonight from the St. Croix County District Attorney's Office, and she's one of those drug prosecutors. Amber?
Good evening, my name is Amber Hahn. I've been a prosecutor here in St. Croix County since 2009. I came in January of 2009. And beginning on June 2nd of this year, I was named St. Croix County's drug prosecutor. And that's the position that Representative Knudsen referred to when he spoke. And I'm trying, position is very new, like I said, it just started on June 2nd, but I'll tell you a little bit about how I'm approaching the position and what I expect to do in the coming years as we go forward with this new position. What I have learned in my 5.5 years here, and especially with the heroin problem as it's sort of exploded in our community recently, is that prosecution and investigation of heroin and opiate abuse cases are very different than how we approach illicit drugs. And when I talk about heroin, I will always say heroin and opiate abuse because, at least in my experience, they've been inextricably linked. And by opiates, I include prescription drugs. Traditional approaches to prosecution and investigation have fallen short of making a significant difference in this problem. It's necessary to try new and less utilized approaches to prosecution and investigation if we want to have success. A good illustration of the differences between traditional prosecution and investigation of illicit drugs and what we're dealing with heroin and opiate abuse is in this forum here today. You've got representatives from the school district, from the legislature, law enforcement, the community foundation, the DA's office, medical and treatment providers, as well as parents. Dealing with heroin and opiate abuse affects all of these stakeholders and many more in the community, and it's going to take all of us to address this problem. As a drug prosecutor, before I became a drug prosecutor, as a prosecutor traditionally, we typically work in the courtroom. We process cases, we try cases, and to some limited degree we assist law enforcement in the building of cases. As a drug prosecutor, I'm really expanding my role to approach investigation and prosecution in more non-traditional means outside of the courtroom. And the reason for that is like I said, that a lot of this problem is not reaching the courtrooms, and we probably don't want to see it reach the courtrooms. And so the emphasis really is on prevention and again, non-traditional outside the courtroom work. Some examples of this type of non-traditional work is working with community partners on prescription drug problems. You've heard about a lot of the take-back program and those sorts of things. Another direction that we're exploring is looking at prescription drugs in vulnerable adults and elderly, the community. There's a lot of access there that needs to be addressed. Working to bring law enforcement and parents and other groups in the community together to share information and to share knowledge and experience that they have so that parents are better equipped to understand what to look for and also what to do about what they're seeing. Also to strengthen that relationship so that parents feel comfortable going to law enforcement as a resource in more of those situations. Looking for opportunities to find more resources for investigation and operations and education. One of the things I've implemented is doing state forfeitures, which is where when we have a case where we're prosecuting a drug dealer and they have monies or properties which were realized through drug dealing or profits they've made off of selling illicit drugs, we're going after those monies and redirecting them back to our state agencies to assist with our efforts. We're also working to improve and expand investigative tools and procedures. I'm going to be working on some more trainings with law enforcement and other groups so that we can try to approach prosecution and investigation in new ways. This is a difficult one to explain, but the best example that I can give, and I think probably the next speaker will talk about this too, is a lot of our Heroin is coming from over the river. It's coming from the Twin Cities area into the Hudson community and into St. Croix County communities. And for prosecution, that can be challenging sometimes because we have something called jurisdiction, which is where prosecutors in St. Croix County prosecute crimes that occur in St. Croix County. And when the deliveries and the dealers and the suppliers are across state lines, that can present some complications for going after those people, being proactive about stopping their supply. And there are tools in the law, there are tools in prosecution and investigation that we can use to develop investigations to bring those people to justice, even though they're across the state line, even though we're dealing with jurisdiction issues. But it's a different way of thinking about investigation and prosecution, and it's a different way of building cases. And that's something that I'm looking into doing some more education and training with, and also working directly with investigative teams to expand our use of those laws, to expand our reach to where the drugs are coming from. And just being open to new and innovative ideas. Not being confined to the way that we've always done things, not being confined to working purely in the courtroom, but being open to new and innovative ways to approach this problem. And we hope that through all these new approaches and this work non-traditionally, that we're going to have a lasting impact on this problem in the community. So that's where we're getting started, that's where we're moving to. So hopefully I'll be out in the community more and you'll be seeing me more outside the courtroom than in the courtroom. Although if you do see me in the courtroom, hopefully you're on my jury. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Amber. Our next speaker is Detective Sergeant Jeff Willems. Jeff and Chief Marty Jensen of the Hudson Police Department contacted me a year ago in April to talk about the heroin issue here because they, of course, they see the consequences of it up front, and they wanted to make sure that the community knew about it. So that's where kind of all of this got started, if they hadn't come forward. And Jeff has been very articulate about the issue here in Hudson, and he's going to bring us up to date to where we are right now.
Hi, thanks for having me again this year. I really appreciate what you guys are doing with the foundation. I think it's a step in the right direction. Last year, when we all met together, we were here to talk about the alarming number of deaths that we were seeing from opiate-based drug overdoses. It kind of created a hypersensitivity to law enforcement, and whereas we were starting to look deeper into other death cases that weren't necessarily suspicious, but we couldn't really show that they were natural causes. So we really started to work very closely with the medical examiner's office here in St. Croix County. And by digging deeper, we started to find out that people who were thought to have died from natural causes also had lethal amounts of prescription drugs in their system too. And these are people of all ages. So we found out very rapidly that it wasn't just a young person problem either. It was extending through every kind of demographic group in our communities. We also found out that it was not just a Hudson problem, as we knew. And like Representative Knudsen said, this is a statewide and national problem. It's not just in one area. So some of the things that have happened since the last time that we've met, we've found that the drug problem isn't going away. It's still here. People are still dying with prescription drugs in their system. More people are calling and transporting friends or family to get medical attention more rapidly. We've had, I don't know the specific number of cases that we've had, and it's hard for me to do that because we don't normally get notified of those cases. But people that bring a person overdosing to an emergency room and they're saved, we have found out on the back end, a lot of those have happened this year alone.
I don't know if that's attributable to the new law. I would like to think that that had something to do with it. But in any event, that's happening more and more. As more people are being saved because people aren't just saying, oh my gosh, they're dying, I'm out of here. They're taking the steps to help them, which is good. I have to touch on the drug take-back program that we have here in St. Croix County. Every police department has a drug take-back bin that you can take your prescription drugs that you're not using anymore and drop them off, and you don't have to worry about them being in your medicine cabinets. You don't have to worry about people that shouldn't be getting their hands on them. I also know that there's been some discussions about elderly people, maybe live in rural areas that aren't mobile enough to be able to get to these police departments to drop them off. There has been discussions about what we can do to make that better, so hopefully we get some answers here in the next few months on what we can do with that. What we are seeing now, from September of 2013 through July 4th of this year, and these are statistics. I'm going to put my statistical hat on a little bit here. These are stats from the St. Croix County Medical Examiner's Office. September of 2013 through July 4th, there have been 34 cases of death where the death was ruled as not natural, okay? So of those, there were 10 that were true accidents or suicides, leaving 24 cases. 18 of those 24 cases, the decedent had a history of drug abuse and tested positive with toxicology, okay? People are still dying from opiate-based overdoses, okay? Also, currently, there are 11 toxicologies pending where all indications are at least one drug will be a contributing factor to the death. Okay, so are we making progress? Yes, I think we're making progress. Are we where we need to be? No. Oh, it's pretty clear that we're not. Gonna keep my statistical hat on a little bit here. Since July of 2012 when we last met, we have had in St. Croix County, that's St. Croix County Sheriff's Department, Hudson Police Department, and every other municipal jurisdiction within St. Croix County, okay? So in St. Croix County, since July of 2012, there have been 22 heroin cases that have been opened. 6 of those were in Hudson. There have been a countless number of pill cases, not necessarily just opiate prescription pills, but also benzodiazepines and your Xanaxes and things like that, okay, that kids are experimenting with. 81 meth cases, 10 of those out of Hudson. And on average, as the task force, and the drug task force in St. Croix Valley is made up of Pierce County, Polk County, and St. Croix County, on average, per quarter, we open up about 300 new drug investigations. St. Croix County alone opened 201 new drug investigations in the first quarter of 2014. So, it's still there, it's still a problem, and we continue to try and combat it. Now, the problems that we run into with heroin is that, as Amber touched on, the distribution doesn't come from St. Croix County. We don't have a distribution hub in St. Croix County that we know of. It's all mostly coming from over the river. So our kids, our people, our users are driving over there to pick it up, coming back here, and giving it to others to use. The other thing that is tough as a law enforcement perspective is that when people get their supply of heroin or their pills or whatever they're getting, they tend to use it right away. They don't hang on to it for a long period of time. They don't hang on to it when they have contact with law enforcement for law enforcement to find it. So, as Amber said, much of the heroin and opiate cases don't end up in the courtroom. Well, that's a big reason why, is because we don't typically find people with heroin on their person. Okay, we usually find out that they were a heroin addict after the fact, which is what we're trying to prevent. So they're using it right away, and we don't find it. What we're doing to deal with it is basically intelligence gathering and arrests, and trying to get them in the system, whether it's in the court system to get court-ordered treatment or some kind of an intervention that way is kind of the way that we're working with it. But we are very busy, and I think we're headed in the right direction, but we've got a lot of work to do yet. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Jeff. Last year, one of our speakers who left made an incredible impression on our audience was Karen Hale, who sadly lost her daughter, her beautiful daughter Alyssa, to a drug overdose. And over the last year, I've had the privilege of getting to know Karen a lot better. And I think her path, her grief journey has been incredibly difficult, as anyone who's a parent can understand. But I have been so impressed by what she has done through this year, what she has learned, and what she continues to give to this issue and this problem, and continue to contribute the way she has is really an incredible way to honor Alyssa's memory. So please welcome Karen Hale.
Thank you very much. I cannot believe it's already been a year that I stood before you and I told the pain. You see, because it had only been 8 weeks that I had lost Alyssa. But this last year, I also lost my mom. 5 months after Alyssa, I buried my mother. I had to go back to Michigan and clean out her home. And I wasn't in the position to make any of those decisions, so I rented the biggest Penske truck without having a CD license and brought all her things home until I could go through it. So I'm slowly getting through her things. Things have been written about how Alyssa's room had stood at the test of time. I have since repainted, I've redecorated, and still has her flair and her smell. My son Colin graduated college. He moved to Denver, Colorado in September. And he landed himself a phenomenal position as an engineer in the oil field and is working in the Dakotas. My stepson Nick, whom I raised for the last 8.5 years, we had some issues, and he moved back with his father and hasn't spoke to me since. My life has completely changed. I found myself blogging and posting on Alyssa's Facebook page, the memorial site, Rest Easy, Alyssa Ivey. And with that, I was sharing my pain, begging kids to go get help, offering some advice or just little snippets of things I would find, because I threw myself into educating myself because, see, I was ignorant. I didn't understand that this was a disease that my daughter had. See, I took it personal. I felt I failed. And when I started doing that, people within this community started privately messaging me. When Meg asked me to talk tonight, I went back and looked. I have been contacted by 22 young people in our community who have reached out to me either in sorrow or their same pain, that either knew Alyssa, knew of her, but may have had the same problem they were facing. And then they would ask my advice, where could they get help? I made some mistakes. I've learned along the way, but I have learned so much that this is a disease. It has symptoms like any other disease or disorder that are common across the board. What was so amazing was the avenues that I found. I found out how to work systems, how to reach out to our county people, how that at Fairview you can call at 7 a.m. and see if a bed is available, and if it's not, then you call at 9 if someone didn't show up for at 8 o'clock. And I also found out you can call again at 4 if no one showed. And I also found out if I drove a young person to Unity, I could get them in immediately for detox. But see, I couldn't get that here in my county, in my state. And it hurt because I would watch these young kids desperate. Because you know what? We were no longer in the proactive state. They were no longer toddlers when they were teaching them what we learned as children, just say no. We were in a reactive mode. And how do you turn your back on someone that is begging for help? Because when you take them to an ER in our community, they're told that they're not under a life-threatening condition. But see, to them, they are. The withdrawal is something excruciating, and I personally had gone through that, watching Alyssa withdraw and trying to detox. And then I would have parents reach out to me, and I remember that same hopeless and helpless feeling that and how could I turn my back? But I think the biggest accomplishment is I stopped blaming. I stopped blaming Alyssa's boyfriend for her issue. I didn't lash out because I recognized that he too had the disease of addiction, just like so many of these kids. And what I continually found is these kids are just not addicted just to one area. Some of them are using heroin, meth, coke, marijuana, alcohol. And when they come out of treatment, the biggest thing in their stumbling block is social isolation. You see, they can't go back to their friends because that continually brings them back into the core and continually reminds. They can't drive by a Walmart because they might be a trigger for them, an external trigger that they remember they may have met someone to pick up their drugs. They may have gone to a Walgreens to get a syringe. They may have driven by a house. See, I understand these triggers that these kids with the disease of addiction have because I too have my own triggers. When I see a Pontiac Grand Am, a silver one driving in town, I think it's my daughter. Or how to this day, I can't go into Herbert's and Gerbert's because it reminds me when we first moved here of her first job. Or when I go in Walmart, like today, because I needed ink. She used to work in that counter behind the phone system. And I can see her sticking out like a sore thumb. You see, I have a common bond with these kids, and I don't know why they're out here contacting me. I'm a nobody. But they are. But how can you turn your back? See, I understand their shame. I understand their blame as they come out of treatment, as they're trying to heal. I have taken classes. I have learned about methadone and Suboxone. I've gone over to Valhalia Place because I didn't get that. I too thought, why would you take one opiate and replace it with another? Why would you take a Vivitrol shot that in your chance of crossing and using again, you could die? But you know what? What I find over and over is what works for one may not for another. And if we can bind with all these tools that are out there, the AA may not work for someone that doesn't understand what a higher power is or God or is in touch with that. That tool may not work. NA may not work. And we see repeat of these kids going in and out of treatment over and over. And the best way I can explain it is, say you had an eating disorder and you have a person that goes to Weight Watchers, and then you have someone that goes to Curves, but someone hasn't been successful at Curves, but someone that has been successful at Weight Watchers. And they're constantly wanting to go back to that eating, and they go back downtown in Hudson, and all of a sudden, Kanoki's doors open up, and there's that wonderful smell of chocolate. And before you know it, they're standing there with, they've got an ice cream cone in one hand and truffles in the other. And they're saying, why am I doing this? I know I shouldn't do this. This is what these kids are going through. It's like an ice cream cone or a truffle constantly calling them back. I've learned more about the brain and the neurological side. I've learned that we can image a normal brain in those with addiction. That do you know that someone that uses cocaine, it takes 100 days for their brain to go back to normal capacity. Someone that is on meth, it takes 130 days for their brain, because we can see these images. And for those on heroin, 150 days. But see, what we offer out is 5 days or 4 days of detox, 21 or 14 days. Not necessarily because we are asking for that, because insurance sometimes dictates, or for those that don't have insurance. I still see kids crossing the river, trying to find a home to use that as an address in order to qualify for Rule 25. I went to Unity, took a young person there, and I was allowed to go for the visitation. And when I went through those closed doors, and they were scanning in bracelets of about 5 individuals, and I asked, well, what are they doing? Why are they going out the door? Have they been released? They said, no, they're part of Rule 25, and they're being brought over here to Berkwood. See, beds are waiting. That concerned me because 3 weeks later I had a young individual. So I said, call Berkwood. There was no beds available. Some of those beds are waiting for those on Rule 25 from people in another state. We don't hear about Arbor Place up in Menominee, a place that we have not too far. We hear about Ellie Phillips or Hazelton. But what I'm getting at is we have to stop shaming and blaming these young kids. When they relapse, is it really fully their issue? Have we not, as a system or a society or as a community, may have failed them too? Have we not developed or given them enough tools? See, I get the shame and blame because people in this community did that to me. I went out to dinner with another mother who lost her child, went to a restaurant here in town, and this owner came up to her and I and said, oh, what are you out celebrating? And this individual looked and said, we're not. We get together every once in a while because we share a common thread, a common bond. We both lost our children. And this business restaurant owner looked at me and he said, well, at least you didn't lose a parent. Unbeknownst to him, just a month before, I had just lost my mom, and I made sure he knew that. And he told us, well, they had a choice. And this individual, her and I both went out of that restaurant here in our town because we were shamed, we were blamed, we were ridiculed. Had another incident. A religious group took it upon themselves from our community and sent me not 1 copy, but 3 copies along with the original obituary and the headline that Meg wrote, 21-year-old found. In every place that it said death, dead, died, drugs, overdose was highlighted. And I was shamed with Bible verses of how bad of a parent, how damnation, how my child would not have gone to heaven. I have been shamed in this community, just like our kids with addiction has. So I get this. I didn't wake up and wish this upon my daughter, nor did she wish it upon herself. I had one young man say, it's easier for me to tell people I'm an alcoholic. You see, when I tell people I'm an alcoholic, they say, oh yes, my mother was, my grandfather, oh yes. Oh, well, after you go to your AA meeting, slap you on the back and say, let's meet for a beer. But the minute I tell them I'm a drug addict, they look at me so differently. We use words like dirty UAs, clean UAs. We keep shaming them for their failures. We call them junkies. These are someone's children. Someone loves this individual. They're not garbage. My daughter wasn't a garbage. No one deserves to be labeled. See, we don't label those with diabetes, those with a weight condition, those with heart disease, but we do for those that have the disease of addiction. You know, I brought up last year the wonderful quote by Henry Ford that said, "Coming together is the beginning," and we did that a year ago. We have made so much inroads. Keeping together is progress. And today we are continually making progress because I personally am not stopped talking, because I will not be shamed for my daughter. I will not be shamed for anyone else that has been impacted. But staying together is success. You know, our systems that we have out here, they're not perfect. But what we need to do is recognize where our strength and keep expanding on those. And where our weaknesses are, if it's not working, let's expand. As stakeholders, we have to. Because you know what? This problem hasn't gone away. We still have meth filtrated in our town. We still have heroin. We still have cocaine. We still have marijuana. We still have Molly's, ecstasy. But you know what I continually also see is our young kids who can stand up and say, I'm X amount of days sober from heroin, have maybe transcended their addiction to other avenues, other drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, gaming. So something's not working if our kids are continually in and out of treatment, in and out of our court system. This pass-fail. See, we continually blame them, but we need to look at all of the tools. Maybe we're not providing them with the right tools or enough tools or the certain avenues. We need to continually define and redefine. And we cannot be afraid to speak about this. I'm not afraid. You know, I've been chastised by some about the media attention. You know, I didn't ask for this media. It basically started with this forum last year when Boyd Huber asked to interview me about the forum. And then Wisconsin Radio asked me to be part of some of their programming. And I just found out last week, thanks to Jeff Willem, who got how the New York Times woman got my name. I was baffled for months. Out of the tens and thousands of moms that lost, how in the heck did she find me? And then the headline news, when they approached me and they were doing their story, I didn't fit the bill, so I introduced them to Phil. And then the Oprah. And Sherry Hole invited her, and it was funny. For 3 days, they were filming, watching me in and out of my house. And how many takes did it take watching Sherry take off her coat at my front door? But all that didn't come on the... But you know what? This wasn't about just Alyssa. This was about all the young girls and young men that we've lost. All the young girls and young men that are still struggling. And all the parents that don't know where these resources are. How many of you know about a Facebook page called St. Croix Substance Abuse Coalition? There's not many. And this isn't chastising Sarah or our county. No, because you know what? This is a full-time job for me, and I'm not getting paid for helping parents and young kids. And Sarah has been tasked not only to be an AOD counselor, to help support and get people who have addiction into treatment, into counseling, into help, to working with drug court. And she's supposed to still blog and bring this education. We have some flaws in our system. We have some that are working. And you know what? We have to stop that this one or this department or that is better. You know what? We need to put the egos and check them at the door, because we have to work this issue together. And when something's not working, we need to change, we need to adapt, and we need to tailor these programs. You see, these aren't bad kids trying to get good. These are sick people trying to get well. And I'm going to repeat this, because they are not, just like my daughter wasn't a bad person trying to become good, or those that may have passed or failed in treatment. They are sick people trying to get well. I thank you, and I hope we keep our voices going for the momentum. Thank you.
I'd like to mention that Karen, and along with Patty Schackner, our medical examiner for St. Croix County, will be speaking at two events later this year, in August and later on, from the Department of Justice, dealing with drug-endangered children and other topics related to opiate and heroin abuse. And both of those women have also spoken in a variety of other situations across the state. The last person that we're going to hear from tonight, and with regard to this issue, is Pete Van Dusart. Pete was one of our speakers last year. He's the best I know at pulling things together, so I think he's in the right place here at the end of our program. And I'd be interested to hear what he has to say about where we're at a year later.
My name is Pete, and I'm an alcoholic and an addict. I'm going to be pretty brief tonight. I'm going to go over a few things about what we do at Hudson Hospital. I've also had contact with Sarah to talk about the St. Croix County Coalition, so I'll say a few things about that. She sent me some information for tonight, and then just a few closing remarks. First of all, we have an intensive outpatient treatment program at Hudson Hospital. We've had that treatment program there for 27 years. We see about 300 people come into our doors each year seeking treatment and looking for an assessment and to decide if they have a problem, what kind of problem they have, and then get involved in treatment. People who do enter our program come 3 times a week for 22 sessions, so for about 2 months, and each of those sessions is 2.5 hours. So we are considered an intensive outpatient program. And then they're involved in our continuing care groups, which are 2 hours long for another 5 months. Most of the people who enter our intensive outpatient program are involved in treatment from 8 to 10 months, front to back. And in the last year, I did look over a few stats. I'm not going to show any stats, but in general, we see people, as Dr. Hellman said, from all different parts of the spectrum who have substance abuse problems. The primary drug of choice for people who come to our treatment program is alcohol. The second is opiates-based medications or other opiate-based drugs, and then other drugs. We run at about 60% alcohol as the primary drug of choice. Although some of those stats are a little misleading because, as Karen said, people are using a lot of things all at the same time, so it gets kind of complicated. In the last year, we have expanded our services. We now are doing assessments at Westfields Hospital in New Richmond, and we are approaching adding treatment groups up at Westfields as well. We are also pursuing a mental health license at Hudson Hospital, so we will have co-occurring programs that will include mental health treatment along with our alcohol and drug treatment. I'm also a part of a 6-hospital cooperative task force that is looking at behavioral health issues in the entire region, and one of the projects on that task force is to do an education program and standardize procedures to handle detox issues in all of these hospitals. That includes people who come into the emergency and people who are in our inpatient beds in the hospital going through withdrawal. That does not mean that we'll be starting up inpatient detox programs. It means because there isn't a detox program here, those folks are ending up in our hospitals. And we're now starting a program to educate and come up with a unified protocol about how we treat those cases in those hospitals. I'm also on the board of NAMI. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. There is a St. Croix County or a St. Croix Valley affiliate that covers both Pierce and St. Croix County. One of the projects that NAMI is doing here in this community is we're doing a crisis intervention training program for police officers. I'm a part of that training program. Crisis intervention training has been around a long time, and there are real long programs. We got a grant and then got some additional funding and did some fundraising to do a program that is a 4-hour training. Right now we have an agreement with Pierce County, and we are training all of their officers. I believe it's somewhere over 120 officers in our crisis intervention training program. So those are some of the things that have been going on in the last year. In terms of the Substance Abuse Coalition that was mentioned earlier, these are some of the things that Sarah sent along for me to share that they've been working on. They did do a What's in Your Medicine Cabinet program, for example, at Somerset School to talk exactly about the kinds of things we're talking about here tonight. But beyond that stuff, what I want to share about is, first of all, to thank the Hudson Community Foundation, because I'm involved in a lot of different things that have to do with this issue in the community, and I also am involved with families who are struggling with these issues when they come into our doors for treatment, with parents, that kind of thing. And I can tell you that the attention that this has brought in our community has made a significant, real, measurable difference. And I'm very grateful for you folks for raising the awareness, as uncomfortable as it is for some people in our community, as difficult it is to attach that to the name Hudson. There are people talking about it, and there's people asking questions about it, and people having those conversations about what is an overdose and why do overdoses occur and how is it related to prescription drugs. Those conversations have happened thousands of times in the last year, and it does make a difference. We have people come into our treatment groups who understand some of these things because of what's been in the media. So it's been key information. But more important than that is the stories. So I went to the vigil that was mentioned earlier, standing out in the rain, and listened to the family stories. And that's really what this is about. This is about families. And if you weren't at the vigil, anybody watching this who didn't see the vigil, I really encourage you to look that up and watch those stories. Because there were the sisters and the moms and the brothers talking about the things that happened in the past year, the events that their family member wasn't at, and what that's like. And as I was standing in the rain, listening to those stories, and everybody in here has had their own loss. Everybody knows a little something or a lot of something about real powerful pain of loss. And so I was thinking about my own loss in my life and things I've gone through. And I was thinking about the numbers, and if there were a virus that came through Hudson that killed that many young people, and it got in the news, some kind of virus came in, people are susceptible from 16 to 24, and they're dying, and there's families reacting to this, what kind of vigil would it be? What kind of torches would there be about what are we going to do about this? And that is exactly what has happened. That is exactly what has happened. Because Karen's right, this is a health condition. And people are dying. This problem, I was thinking about the years, people were talking about the years, Dr. Hellman talked about being in practice. I've been a professional counselor in alcohol, drug, or mental health for 29 years as of 2 days ago. And so this problem has been around. What rose so much attention were the deaths, and it ought to scare people. I want to end with just kind of sharing, I have a counselor who's sick, and as a lot of you know, if you've been a manager, that when your employee is sick, then managers fill in. So I've been doing a lot of filling in lately, doing a lot of groups. And these are the folks in some of the aftercare groups. And the happy news are those stories. The stories about those people talking about getting together with new friends and laughing so hard that they can't breathe, and they're crying from being silly without any substances involved at all. Because they have new friends now, and they're doing new things and building new relationships and watching people offer other people jobs right in the group for people who are getting back on their feet. This stuff is going on in our community as well. And we'll be there, we'll continue to do this. I'm sure I'll be working at it for 30 and then 31 and 32 years. And so please, if you have any concerns, if you have any fears, if you hear those stories, reach out, do that next push, have that next conversation, and get some help. And I'll just leave it with that. Thanks.
Thank you. To bring the evening to a close, like I said, there will be a question and answer period if you want to talk with these folks informally. If you go out the door, down to the right is the fellowship hall, and we certainly invite you all to come back. To close out the evening, we'd like to hear from Annette Cook, who is the president of the Hudson Community Foundation, and our commitment, she'll talk about the ongoing commitment that the foundation has to this issue.
Good evening. As Meg said, my name is Annette Cook, and I am the current president of the Hudson Community Foundation. I want to thank all of you for being here this evening. You all have your own reasons for being here, whether you were present as a speaker, and I thank you to those who were here as speakers, whether you're a family member who's lost a loved one, or you're a community member that's concerned about this issue. Many of our speakers have mentioned the word stakeholders. We're all stakeholders as members of this community, as professionals who work with this issue on a daily basis, or as family members who grieve for the loved one that they've lost. We're all stakeholders, and we should all be responsible for solving this issue and this problem in Hudson. And Karen, you're right. Hudson needed to get over its shame as being labeled a heroin community problem. This is not just a family problem. This is a community problem that we are dedicated to helping solve. Everyone in this room is dedicated to helping solve this issue. We don't want to be labeled as a community that has a heroin issue. No community wants to be labeled as a community that has a heroin or a drug issue or any other type of problem. But the fact is, we do have a heroin problem. We do have a drug problem. What's different about this community is that we've acknowledged that. And without acknowledgement, you can't solve the problem. That's the first step in moving forward toward a solution. So I thank all of you who came forward with your stories at the vigil. Looking at those pictures, those young men and women could have been anyone's children. They could have been anyone's children. And we have lost too many young men and women in this community. And we have to take steps to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. I'd just like to relay some personal experiences, if you would bear with me. I've had a lot of experience working with youth in our community, either coaching, teaching, mentoring. And in the course of two of my own children's high school years, I taught their religious small group sessions at our home. And Shortly after graduation, one of the young men that was in one of my groups passed away from a drug overdose. I had heard rumors that he had used drugs, but I never saw the signs. I never saw the signs, and they were there. So that's one instance. Just recently, a friend posted on Facebook, and some of you in this room may have seen that post. She was along the river. There were a couple young women kayaking on the river, talking as people talk when they're together. And she thought, oh, they must be talking about the usual teenage girl issues. No, they were talking about where to get Vicodin and the fact that one of them had a mother who had Vicodin at home in the medicine cabinet. She posted this and mentioned that if you are a parent who had daughters kayaking on the river, you need to look into your medicine cabinet. You need to talk with your daughters. We all need to be talking to the young people of our community. We all need to be watching. And we need our young people to know that we are watching, we are listening, we are concerned, and we are taking action to solve this problem in our community. As mentioned, our speakers will be staying if you have more questions for them. And again, thank you so much for being here this evening.